moving on that very point, dancers for a long time, let's talk about injury. Injury is one of the things, we love to talk about injury in dance science. And there is a debate, I think, brewing in terms of what will we see from this pandemic. So one could argue this is a very high risk time. We have students being told they have to do single leg jumps on cement floors, linoleum floors. But we also know from the research that most dance injuries are overuse, overtraining injuries. So, to play devil's advocate, this could actually be a very restorative time in many ways for dancers if they use it correctly. Getting enough sleep, having more social support, maybe from their family. Maybe that might be a risk for some or a benefit for others. So shall we talk a little bit about injury? And also I'm going to throw into the mix with that question the idea that dancers don't have an off season. So if you're a dancer, that might not seem strange to you, but if you're from the world of athletics, most athletes have an off season during which they still do physical work, but they are not training in their single discipline at their maximum pace and capacity. So really, having an off season is not a crazy idea for athletes. It just is for dancers. So how do we want to talk about injury? Does anybody want to speak to these ideas at all? Jen, go for it.
Yeah, I'll dive in. I think, it's particularly in my environment, we were kind of mid-semester when all of this happened, and we were seeing kind of a peak of injuries. They were really starting to increase the rehearsal load, and they were midterms, so they weren't sleeping, and their nutrition was out the door, so we were seeing pretty, usually around that time, you see sort of a spike of injuries. And so it's been really lovely to take this time to coach them through how to heal themselves. And so they're all taking the time. They all know their physical therapy. They all know what they should be doing. So they actually have the time to do it now. And so I think actually in many ways, this is giving them time to heal some of those chronic injuries that they might be seeing. Along with that is a great opportunity for them to be doing cross-training, for them to be working on their plyometrics. We were talking about jumping. I think this is actually an opportunity for them to see jumping in a different way. Let's work on plyometrics. Let's work on our cardiovascular training. Let's work on our strength training. Let's do body weight training. And so asking them to actually take this time as an off season to build strength, to build body awareness. It's actually kind of a blessing in many ways. And hopefully they'll be able to come back stronger so that those injuries will actually decrease when they get back into the dance studio.
I love that point about plyometrics and seeing jumping differently because, when you're a dancer, you might just think about jumping as this fancy thing and you spring your feet and you point. It's like, no. Right. So I've been going to the park with my toddler and I'm in my sneakers and I'm like, oh, I could just squat and jump. Like people jump, just like regular people. I could get up on a log and jump down from it. Jumping isn't just this aesthetic function. So I love that idea of taking this time to reinvent your physicality and revisit your physicality in different ways. Sonia, what were you going to add?
Yeah, bringing those 2 points together about the risk. I think maybe the risk will come later. Mm-hmm. I think there might be a greater risk with the expectations that we might have when we get back to normal, whatever normal is and however long that takes. We'll be desperate to get doing it. We'll be absolutely desperate to catch up with what we perceive as maybe missed opportunities, whether that's the lack of training that students are worried about, or even those recreational and social connections that we talked about earlier. So we'll all be a bit gung-ho, and we might succumb to pressure as institutions to make up things. And when is the time to do that? So I think we have to be really careful about not escalating too soon, and probably taking even more time to run in, to taper, to periodize than we would normally. We probably, as you said, Jen, have to think about keeping the dancer's condition in a different way. we're all getting used to now doing, conditioning, physical resistance work, body weight training, which is some of the things we're offering now at Trinity Laban. It's a perfect way, but there's some other ways. We talked about alignment, so maybe Alexander classes, seated Feldenkrais classes, some things that we don't normally have on our curriculum. Might be, to rather than replace what we can't do, is actually bring something different in so that students keep interested. For example, I do a class and I'm doing it online. And when you do your Tai Chi, you go through the forms and things. And I've been really appreciating doing the class online because the teacher is going through absolute quality. We're just doing this, feeling things differently in detail that I couldn't do in a normal class. And I thought, this is really telling me something. I'm learning more. I'm releasing more tension by not doing and doing something different that will absolutely apply to my dance practice when I get back. Having said that, I am a little worried that I won't be ready to work when I get back. And I'm a bit sort of obsessed with I must keep going so that when we do get back to normality, I'm ready to spring back into class straight away. And I think I might succumb to that pressure myself of being, right, let's go. So I do have concerns about that.
I think I'm going to add on to that really quickly from like the studio where I work is, like I said, a competition studio. And so all of their competitions have been rescheduled. So like there's tentatively one in July, there's tentatively one in August. And my concern is that these dancers have been moving very minimal movement in a very small space. And then all of a sudden they're going to go into a studio for maybe a week or two, if they even can. And then they're supposed to go onto a stage and do a huge performance. And I'm like, so I'm trying to prepare them mentally, like this competition might not be your best. That's okay. If it happens, if it doesn't happen. And then, how do I train them on the psychological component as well as the strength conditioning component? Like if you're going to have to go back and do a Grand Allegro, should you, could you, what can I do to do that? So I think that's like where my concern is sitting right now for a lot of my students. And then a point that I wanted to add on with Sonia of like, now's the time to do the Alexander technique and the somatic techniques, which I think we can go into is I'm fortunate to have my like Pilates training, but I'm realizing like maybe my students need yoga or maybe they do need this. And I'm not a yoga teacher. I don't, so I think to a certain level I can offer it, but I'm also not trying to be an expert in Franklin movement, but I'm like, who do I know that has this expertise? Like, do I know a nutritionist that can come and talk to my students on my Zoom? So I'm also trying to think creatively of like, it's not my sole responsibility to now offer yoga. I'm not a yoga instructor, so I don't want to offer more harm or offer something incorrectly. But maybe I know somebody where it's like, would you come teach yoga? And I could come teach like a trade of services almost to kind of expand my dancers' knowledge base of like what is out there versus this like very regimented classes that they're taking, and also utilizing resources and other people who are also at home wanting to offer something. And so reaching out to them as well as like another way to have a source and to be creative and to keep your dancers moving in something that they've maybe never experienced before. And it could open a whole new world of what they would like to do.
I think, that has been one of the benefits also of this experience is that our network really opens up. So that's a great idea, Sutton. And, that is the function of this Facebook group, Science for Dance Educators, and IADMS in general. If you feel like you need a nutritionist to be speaking to your dancers right now, let us know. We have their names, and now everything's remote. So it doesn't matter if you're in Spain and they're in Colorado, that's not a problem at this point. So, make use of that. I also just want a couple comments coming in. Robert saying, I think it's a good point to make that for a lot of younger dancers who are continuing to develop and grow, addressing basic movements through different ways, so the plyometrics and the weight training will allow for development as humans as well. And just sets a strong their artistry. And there are there's a lot of discussion out there about early specialization. So being a very young person and specializing exclusively in dance is potentially a factor for injuries. So I think, that's a good point that he makes in terms of very, younger dancers and actually the importance of cross-training human movement. And I also, there's been so many points that you all just said. I want to start to move our conversation towards looking forward, because that seems to be where it's naturally heading. Somebody posted, I think it was Amanda Dean maybe posted on the Facebook group an article from a medical doctor. He's a sports medicine doctor and a pediatrician, and he wrote a piece on his website called Active Kid MD. Sorry if I'm getting any of the details wrong, but it's about what we need to think about when we go back to the studio, which I don't think anybody has had a chance to think about until just now. So we have been in triage for a few weeks. I'm in New York City, so it's been 6 weeks that we've been doing this. And now we're starting to be able to think about the future. And some people have asked on the comments, just sort of thinking about moving forward with courses. When all this happened, we just did what Jen suggested. We just figured out, okay, how can we make this work? How can we be flexible and make it work? But now we need to think about, a lot of colleges are not necessarily going to be back in the fall. And, what courses do we want to offer now that we know that and we've had this experience? Or, we might get back to the studio, but we might only be allowed in the room. And how is that going to change our experience? And the conventions and the competitions and the performances might not happen for a year. To gather 500 people in one space, depending on where you are in the world, that might not happen for a while. So how do we think about performing artists who are not able to perform for long periods of time, and sort of anticipate all that will be coming up ahead? Any thoughts about that, anyone?
I think that's really difficult. It's really, yeah. I wish we had the answers to that. Yes. I think it's really difficult because, as our respective governments keep telling us, we don't know how this will pan out. We might move into completely different situations. Social distancing might be not what we see it now. Yeah, do we allow 10 people at a time in a studio and mark out the space that they need to dance in, or do we make sure that we don't contact each other anymore? Do we develop choreography that is about dancing together separately, which artists are starting to do now? I mean, there's some very innovative stuff coming out of this pressured situation. I do worry that we'll go, oh, look what we can do without doing this. I do have a little bit of things that can be truncated and shortened and packaged in a different way. And hey presto, there's still a dancer at the other end of that. Dancing is still dancing, and we're going to want to be able to do it in the way we did it before. So I guess what I'm saying is there isn't an answer. We can speculate, we can have some ideas, but it may be different for different countries, different cities, different, we might all be on different lockdowns, different phases of re-entering what is supposedly normal. So I do think the emotional, the spiritual, the spatial being outside is maybe opportunities to look at, not dissecting, but distilling our dance experience in a very different way, and removing it from what we had before without taking it into something that is less. I guess I haven't answered the question there, but thoughts.
I agree completely.
It's a discussion point.
I think that's a big part of what our anxiety is. And I think it's important to acknowledge that a big part of the anxiety is not knowing what it's going to look like in 2 months, in 6 months, in a year, not knowing what our training is going to look like. And we can speculate about what it might look like, but in some ways that increases our anxiety in some ways, right? And so I guess I've been really looking at it as an opportunity for us to adapt, as I was talking about earlier. I think also we need to consider the fact that getting dance into the world, getting dance to the people is messy. It's just what it is messy, and it rarely looks like a sprung floor with a Marley stage and proscenium. It doesn't always look that way. And so using these new training environments as an opportunity to sort of train us on ways for us to get into the community, for us to perform in odd spaces, for us to bring dance into the world in a new way. In some ways, that's kind of an exciting prospect, and I think as artists, we're up for that challenge, and using these concepts of safe dance practices, we can carry those forward into how we are approaching dance in the park, or how we're approaching dance on an uneven surface, and all those things apply. So actually, this might be a learning opportunity for us as far as how we can bring dance to the people in other ways.
I think I'm trying to remember for myself as a teacher of like, I think I really appreciated that Sonia was like, I don't have the answer. And I'm like, whew, okay, good. Like, I'm not missing anything. There's like a sense of relief knowing that it is not just this one dance studio. It's not just this one college. Like the entire world is having to figure this out, and not one person has to come up with the answer. And so it's kind of like not as lonely. Like, I don't feel like I'm alone in the water. Like, I just see everyone's boats out in the water, like figuring out, well, we don't know where we're going yet. And it's like, that's a very comforting thing. And I'm also trying to tell myself that it's not just the dance world that's trying to figure this out. Small business owners, restaurants, other types of artists are also trying to figure this out. So there's some comfort in that of like, I don't have to have the answer. Someone I look up to doesn't have the answer, and that's okay. And we can be patient within that process. And I think that I'm really appreciating like my students' creativity and the creativity of the network that I see of like all these things that are starting to come out and what they're talking about. I'm like, that is ingenious. That's amazing. We should do that. So I'm also very grateful of how creative our community is to be able to adapt and to be able to not stay in this regimented expectation of what it might be, but knowing that we can always change that.
Looking at some of the comments, I just want to go back to a couple things. Also in terms of going forward, in terms of looking forward, to your point, Sonia, that same reference which I mentioned, which is on the Facebook group right now, he says, listen carefully, beware of week 3. And this comes from Army recruits, data collected from Army recruits, which is that, week 1, everybody's excited and they go, they're all in there and they're motivated and they go, yeah. And it's week 3 when the injuries really start to show up. And when overtraining in week 3, when you think, okay, everyone's up to speed, and you start turning up the volume on the training, can then lead to injuries. So I thought that was a very salient and digestible tidbit of information to think about. And in terms of conditioning in general, I'm seeing a lot of comments about conditioning and questions. And I think just to be aware that, plyometrics and body weight resistance, these are things that should also be done with a supervised professional. So I think we need to find the balance. I mean, I teach Pilates, and yeah, it's important for me to watch and see people doing things, but actually like yoga and Pilates, these were actually meant to be self-practices, that you have a short practice and you're working on certain things and you do it in your home. So I think we have to find a balance right now between, being vigilant and making sure that people aren't hurting themselves in their environments, but also knowing that the human body is resilient and, intelligent, and that it's okay for people to do limited things on their own. I mean, I think when you are doing the same thing over and over again and you're doing it badly, that's a problem. But, you do a HIIT training and you do 1 minute of push-ups and they're not the best push-ups in the world. That isn't probably going to lead to an injury to do a minute of the most mediocre push-ups. You just don't do them obsessively, right? Do you think that that's safe to say? So just finding that balance. And it has been suggested that we should do another panel like this with conditioning experts. And I think that's wonderful. And I will work on that. So anything to add on that conditioning front before I segue to the next point?
I just had a point of, I was talking to my dancers about, I think sometimes it's hard because dancers are so body aware and mobile that most of the time, anything that they're asked to do, they can do it. And so I was telling my students, just because you can do it, let's make sure you should. And so just knowing, like, you might find some videos online and you can do them, but let's really take whether that's something you should be doing.
Yes, absolutely.
I think to that point too, there's also like this, it's like a blessing that there's all these resources of all these incredible dance classes and all these people teaching, and there's all these people doing stretch class and this conditioning class. And like, I mean, there's so much that one can access right now. I think check who is teaching that.
Yeah.
Because if they came on and they said, like, I can teach you conditioning for your jumps. Who is this person? What are they teaching? Are they teaching it correctly? Are they teaching me, like, am I in the right space to do that? To Jen's point, do I need to do that? So I think that as great as it is that there's so much out there and that we do have access to all of this, take a pause and go to people that you trust, go to your resources, and make sure that this is quality information, it's safe information, and it is something that is meant for your body at that time.
Yeah,
I do teach, as part of my role at Trinity Laban, I do teach aspects of dance fitness, and some of my own research is interested in that side of things. And I think there might be a tendency now, because that's the most obvious thing to do, is like, I'll do my, planks and my push-ups, the basic simple stuff, which is great. Please do it. Yes. But people might not have done it before. And even our students who are that little bit reluctant to do that sort of thing. Okay, this is the thing I should be doing, and do more of it now than they did before, and actually really hurting themselves because they don't know the correct technique. So one of the things I've done this first week, spent a lot of time on, is some anatomical detail on the very basic conditioning moves, so that they can go away and watch that, so that when they do self-practice, they understand which muscles are being used in a plank, why you're doing it, why it's relevant to dance. So without getting too academic about it, some supporting information, preparing people, holding them, and then say, right, try that, is rather, right, you should be doing some conditioning, is the thing that we have to think about. And that goes back to our question about what are we delivering. We're not just delivering what we normally do. We have to shift it, transform it, distill it, so that people can use the resources we are able to offer in the most healthy way.
And again, this is a time to help students develop these skills, whether it's, conditioning protocols and learning more about them, or whether it's what Sutton's saying, really assessing your resource and how do you vet a resource and decide if it's good or not, media literacy, things like that. So again, that sort of well-rounded intelligence. I want to come now to a point about Corey's just writing about this, and Celia wrote about this. A lot of people like what you were saying, Sutton, about using other resources. Joe Bowie was asking about this. Somebody used the great term of field trips, that we can go on Zoom field trips to other people's classes, which I just thought was so catchy and adorable. So if you'd like to take a Zoom field trip or bring in a professional or a resource, a few different ways you can find these people. One, on the IADMS page, you can look for members, right? So you can look up nutritionist, and it will give you a list of nutritionists. On this page, which is the Science for Dance Educators Facebook page, you can do the same. You could put a call out and ask if anybody is a nutritionist. You can also do that on the IADMS Facebook page. And you can also contact me personally at education@iadms.org. So that's education@IADMS.org. So I have a vast list of resources that I can share with you. So if you need an Alexander teacher, or you need a conditioning coach, or you need a nutritionist, please reach out and we can help you get that. And anybody have any other resources, yeah, please.
Can I just make a point of that? Those of us who are in academia, is that students have been perceiving perhaps that if we give them a resource, like go and look at this particular We know, Sutton, that the credentials are there, the good practice is there. So we've done our research to say, I can point you honestly towards this good resource. But I think sometimes students think we're copping out of our responsibilities by saying, where's your work? You're just saying, go and do that, and I go and do it with somebody else. I think we have to get the message across that we can save time for other things by saying, we'll give you the class that you want. It's much better presented than I can do in my front room. It's been done before in a good, you can understand it. It's a good teacher. That we're not afraid to point towards these good classes online, because they can help us do our job. It's not that we have to do that job for ourselves all the time. We can do some of the things that the students want us to do. They want us to teach them. They can do us, but us to hold them and teach them and to help them through. So I think going back to all the things we've said is our responsibility and our roles might be slightly different. Let someone else take the weight of delivering the dance class online, as long as it's appropriate, and as long as you say, this would be a good one for your level, this would be a good one for your level, this is appropriate for you. I don't see anything wrong with pointing towards other teachers online, although I think students might see that slightly differently.
I tell students, you're a Ferrari. You don't take a Ferrari to the local auto body shop. You take it to the Ferrari dealership. So when you're looking for resources online, or when I'm giving you a resource, it's because I've vetted them as being a Ferrari, informed maintenance crew. So, there's a lot. I mean, I don't have to tell you all know this out there in the Facebook world. Like, anybody can put anything online. So there's a lot of scary things out there. And I think, again, this is a time to sort of help students learn how to vet a source and learn how to evaluate if a resource is safe. Somebody on the page here is saying, not all great dancers make great teachers. So some of the things that we're seeing during this time, it's great to see somebody who can do 6 pirouettes and then serve a cup of coffee while still balancing an attitude back or something like that. It's a delightful circus trick. Doesn't mean you should try it in your home, so teaching students to be vigilant in that way. I'm just looking through the comments. Anything else? Anyone?
I think to the resources right now on the IADMS page, they have the COVID-19 response page, and it's a list of resources. So I do suggest going there. And of course, if you have a resource, you can reach out to Ellie or myself at conferences@iadms.org, and we can check it out, and we can add that page can grow as this situation is growing. So if you are a quote expert in your field and you have something that you can offer, please let us know. But it's a great page right now that you can reach out to for more information on that.
And the same with SiDI, Safe in Dance International. I mean, IADMS, I'm not sure everybody's aware of that, but IADMS and Safe in Dance International have a partnership, and so we support each other's work. But you can also contact us directly, and we can share with IADMS and vice versa, and we can build resources together. So we're happy to hear from anybody who wants our help, and we'll build resources around what resources are needed, what we see people are wanting to know and to help with. As I say, none of us have the answers, but we can at least, as you said, Sutton, is just calm everybody, keep everybody calm and say, okay, we haven't got the answer, but try this or think about that, or we know.
Thank you. I think we'll wrap up there. If there are not any additional points coming in. So moving forward, again, this is being recorded and will be available to people who are not part of this group, or who would like to take a closer look at everything that we said and offered. We will also go back through the comments section and just take a closer look and see if there's any next steps for us based on that, any resources that you all need and are craving that we can provide to you. I'm getting a lot of thumbs up about this conditioning panel. So I think that may be a resource or something will also be coming along. So keep your eyes open for all of that. without any further delay, I think I'll say thanks so much to Jen and Sonia and Sutton and to all of you who are listening. It's really been a pleasure. A lot of people are just saying they appreciate just hearing your intelligent comments and just knowing that they're part of a larger network of supportive educators. So thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And we will continue to discuss in other platforms and get information out to people.